In a universe that measures strength by the sharpness of one's claws and the might of one's conquests, what is the value of a single piece of bread? On the dying world of Xylos, under the light of 2 failing suns, a lone human boy, the last survivor of a doomed mission, faces a titan. Before him stood the chieftain of the Cathar, a warrior race that had never known mercy. The boy, Leo Thorne, had nothing left but his terror and one final, pathetic food ration. What he did next was not an act of defiance, but an act of humanity so profound, so alien, it would shatter a civilization built on strength and forge a legend that would echo across the stars. This is that story. The air on Xylos tasted of ozone and damp, decaying soil. It was a taste Leo Thorne had grown to associate with fear. For 3 rotations, since the catastrophic atmospheric entry of the survey ship Odyssey, fear had been his only constant companion. He was 12 years old, scrawny for his age, with a mop of brown hair permanently matted with dirt, and a constellation of freckles across his nose that seemed like a cruel joke from a happier time. He was the sole survivor. He'd seen the life support readings for his parents, Dr. Oris Thorne and Dr. Lena Petrova, flatline on the auxiliary panel before the escape pod jettisoned him into this rust-colored nightmare. His father, a renowned xenobotanist, had told him Xylos was a world of harsh beauty. Leo saw only the harshness. The towering, petrified fungi forests blocked the twin suns, casting the landscape in a perpetual twilight. The ground was a treacherous carpet of metallic moss that crunched like broken glass under his worn boots. And now he was being hunted. He could hear them. Heavy, thudding footfalls that were too deliberate for any native beast he'd yet encountered. He could smell them, too. A sharp, ammoniac scent like charged air before a lightning strike. He clutched the single remaining ration bar in his pocket, its foil wrapper crinkling softly. It was nutrient paste number 7, flavored to taste vaguely like synthetic cinnamon. It was the last piece of home, the last thing that tasted of humanity. He scrambled behind a colossal, fossilized stalk, his breath coming in ragged, terrified bursts. His heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. He risked a peek around the edge. They were magnificent and terrifying. The Cathar, taller than any man, their bodies were a fusion of reptilian muscle and insectoid armor. Dark, chitinous plates covered their torsos and limbs, shimmering with an oily iridescence. 4 powerful legs propelled them forward with unnerving speed, and 2 upper limbs, ending in 3-fingered claws sharp enough to shear rock, were held ready. Their heads were elongated, with multifaceted eyes that glowed with a faint inner light, and a series of complex mandibles clicked and shifted as they surveyed the area. Leading them was one even larger than the rest. His chitin was the color of obsidian, etched with scars that told tales of countless battles. A mantle of coarse, dark fur, taken from some formidable local predator, was draped over his shoulders. This was their chief. Leo didn't know his name, but he knew what he represented. The end. The chief stopped, his head tilting as if listening to a sound Leo couldn't hear. His mandibles flared, and a low growl rumbled from his chest, a sound that vibrated through the very ground. He pointed a single black claw directly at Leo's hiding spot. There was no escape. Slowly, his small body trembling uncontrollably, Leo stepped out from behind the petrified fungus. He held his hands up, a gesture he prayed was universal for, "I mean no harm." The circle of warriors closed in, their clicks and growls forming a menacing chorus. They were lean, their chitin pulled taut over their frames. Leo, even in his ignorance of their culture, could see the signs of hardship. This was a hungry pack. The chief, Kalen, strode forward until he loomed over the boy. His shadow was a physical weight, pressing down on Leo's soul. Kalen's multifaceted eyes, 1,000 tiny lenses, took in the strange, soft creature before him. It was weak, no natural armor, no claws, no visible way to defend itself. It was pathetic, hardly a worthy meal, but resources were scarce. The great blight was upon the gloom root, their primary food source, and the tribe's larders were emptying at an alarming rate. His people looked to him for strength, for provision. One of the other warriors, his chitin a mottled brown, and his frame thick with muscle, stepped forward. "Chief Kalen," he rasped, the sound like grinding stones. "It is small, but its flesh is unspoiled. It will feed the clutchlings for a day." This was Gorok, Kalen's most ambitious and brutal warrior. He saw the universe in simple terms. The strong eat, the weak are eaten. Kalen ignored him, his focus entirely on the boy. He could smell the creature's fear. It was a scent as old as life itself. But underneath it, there was something else. Not defiance, not aggression. Something he had no word for. Leo's hand, shaking, went to his pocket. The warriors tensed, their claws extending. They expected a weapon, a final, futile act of resistance. Kalen himself braced for it, a flicker of respect for the small creature's bravery entering his mind. To fight against impossible odds was the Cathar way. But it wasn't a weapon Leo pulled out. It was a small, silver-wrapped bar. He held it out in his trembling palm. His face was pale, his eyes wide with a terror so pure it was almost beautiful. He looked up at the towering alien chieftain, at the face of his certain death, and his voice, though barely a whisper, was clear in the tense silence. "You can take my bread," said the human boy. Silence. It was a profound and absolute silence that fell over the clearing in the petrified forest. The chittering mandibles of the Cathar warriors froze. The wind itself seemed to hold its breath. Gorok, who had been ready to lunge, stopped mid-stride, his massive form locked in a posture of confusion. Kalen stared down at the object in the small creature's palm. It was wrapped in a material that shimmered like a captured star, impossibly thin and delicate. It smelled strange, sweet and artificial, a scent completely alien to the damp, earthy world of Xylos. But it was the gesture, not the object, that had stunned the chieftain's mind into stillness. In the brutal calculus of Cathar existence, there were only two transactions between the strong and the weak: dominance and consumption. When cornered, the weak fought, they fled, or they submitted to their fate. They did not offer. To give away a resource, especially food, was an act of such profound insanity that Kalen's mind, honed by millennia of evolutionary programming for survival, could not process it. "What is this?" Kalen's voice was a low growl, a tectonic shifting of plates deep within his chest. The translator microbe he'd acquired from a crashed merchant vessel decades ago, a prize from his first real battle, was working, but it struggled with concepts, not just words. Leo flinched but held his ground, his small hand still outstretched. It's food, my last one. You look hungry." The boy's words, filtered through the translator, struck the assembled warriors with the force of a physical blow. Gorok let out a hiss of contemptuous laughter. "Hungry! The creature mocks us. It offers a morsel and calls the Cathar hungry. Seize it, chief. Let us show it what true hunger is." Several warriors clicked their claws in agreement, their predatory instincts overriding their confusion. But Kalen did not move. He was transfixed by the boy's eyes. He had seen the eyes of thousands of creatures in the moment of their death. He knew the look of terror, of hate, of resignation. He had never seen this. It was fear, yes, but it was layered with something else, an earnestness, a sincerity that was as baffling as the gesture itself. Why? The question echoed in the vast, cold chambers of Kalen's mind. Why would it give away its last sustenance? Does it believe this meager offering will buy its life? A foolish, illogical thought. The offering is too small to have value. He lowered his massive head, his multifaceted eyes focusing on the boy's face. He saw the dirt, the tear tracks that had dried on the soft skin. He saw the faint tremor in the creature's lips. This wasn't a trick. This wasn't a bargain. It was something else. He remembered his own son, Cathak. He had been born small, a runt by Cathar standards. Kalen had followed the law. The weak are culled for the strength of the tribe. He had left the clutchling on the barren spires, as tradition demanded. He had never spoken of it again. But in the quiet of the deep night, when the twin moons cast skeletal shadows, he remembered the small, trusting eyes. His son had looked at him, not with the fire of a warrior, but with a vulnerable dependence Kalen had been forced to deny. This creature, this human boy, looked at him with that same vulnerability. But instead of asking for something, he was giving. The logic was breaking. The foundation of his world, built on the unshakable truth of might makes right, was fracturing. "Chief, the tribe grows restless," Gorok snarled, his patience worn thin. "This is a mockery of our power." Kalen made his decision. It was not a decision born of logic or strategy, but of a deep, seismic curiosity that outweighed even his hunger. He had to understand this anomaly. Slowly, with a delicacy that seemed impossible for his size, he extended two of his razor-sharp claws. The boy flinched but didn't pull his hand back. Kalen's claws, which could disembowel a scrab beast, gently pinched the silver-wrapped bar, lifting it from the boy's palm. The warmth of the creature's skin lingered on his cold claws for a moment. He brought the bar closer to his face, sniffing it. The sweet scent was cloying, but underneath it he detected the proteins and carbohydrates of sustenance. It was food, real food. The whole tribe watched, expecting him to devour it in one bite, a symbolic consumption of the creature's pathetic offering before taking the creature itself. Kalen's next move shocked the whole tribe. He did not eat it. He held it up for all to see. "The creature is weak," he boomed, his voice echoing through the petrified trees. "It is cornered. It possesses one last piece of sustenance. By all the laws of survival of the Cathar, it should have consumed this to fuel a final, futile fight." He paused, letting his words sink in. It did not. It offered it. He then turned his gaze from the bar to the boy. This is not the act of prey. Prey does not gift its life force to the predator. This is not the act of a warrior. A warrior does not surrender its resources without a fight. I do not know what this act is. Gorok stepped forward, his mandibles clicking with rage. It is the act of a fool. It is a meaningless gesture from a creature that deserves to die. "Silence!" Kalen roared, the force of his voice making Gorok take an involuntary step back. Kalen then did something even more shocking. With a precise movement, he used his claw to tear the ration bar in half. A brownish paste oozed out. He extended one half to Gorok. "If it is meaningless," Kalen challenged, his voice dangerously low, "then you will have no part of it. But if it is sustenance, freely given, then it is a resource. And no Cathar chief wastes a resource." Gorok stared at the offered half, his mind reeling. To refuse would be to defy his chief. To accept would be to partake in this insanity. He saw the eyes of the other warriors on him. With a frustrated hiss, he snatched the half-bar from Kalen's claw and shoved it into his maw, chewing with aggressive, angry crunches. Kalen then broke his own half into smaller pieces. He gave one to his second-in-command, a grizzled old warrior named Tyrax, and another to a young, promising female hunter, Shyla. He then, in front of his entire hunting party, ate the final piece himself. The synthetic cinnamon flavor was bizarre, an alien sensation on his tongue. But it was energy. It was life. And it had been given. He looked down at the human boy who was now staring at him, not with terror, but with wide-eyed, exhausted astonishment. "It will not be killed," Kalen declared. The finality in his tone was absolute. "It will not be caged as a slave. Its action is a puzzle I will understand. Until I do, it is under my protection. It is a guest." The word guest was so foreign in this context that the translator microbe barely found an equivalent. In the Cathar language, the closest term meant a temporary burden you are obligated not to eat. For the warriors of the Cathar, it was as if the sky had turned green, and the ground had become the sky. Their chief had not only spared prey, he had accepted its food, shared it, and elevated it to a status that had never before been granted to an outsider. The foundation of their world had not just fractured, it had been shattered by a boy with a piece of bread. The journey to the Cathar settlement was a tense, silent affair. Leo walked in the center of the warrior pack, a tiny, soft thing surrounded by towering, armored giants. He was no longer prey, but he was far from an equal. He was an object of profound and unnerving curiosity. The warriors kept their distance, their multifaceted eyes tracking his every move, their mandibles clicking in what he guessed were hushed, bewildered conversations. The settlement, called Catharash, was carved into the base of a colossal obsidian spire that pierced the toxic clouds of Xylos's upper atmosphere. It wasn't built so much as excavated, a series of interconnected caverns and ledges that spiraled up the spire's face. The architecture was brutally pragmatic, all sharp angles and unadorned hardened resin. There were no decorations, no art, only the functional necessities of a species locked in a perpetual struggle for survival. This was a fortress, not a home. As they entered the main cavern, a wave of hisses and clicks greeted them. The rest of the tribe, females, clutchlings, and elders, emerged from their alcoves, their eyes fixing on the strange creature in their midst. The scent of fear, his fear, mingled with the smoky, acrid smell of the settlement. Kalen silenced the rising clamor with a single, sharp roar. He led Leo through the gawking crowds to his personal dwelling, a larger cavern higher up the spire, its entrance covered by a thick, cured hide. Inside, the space was Spartan. Weapon racks lined one wall, holding fearsome-looking glaives and serrated blades. In the center, a low stone table was surrounded by sleeping furs. A single female Cathar was tending to a small, glowing fungus that provided a dim, pulsating light. Her chitin was a deep shade of indigo, smoother and more slender than the warriors. She turned as they entered, her movements graceful. "My mate, Lyra," Kalen stated, his tone brooking no argument. He then addressed her directly. "This is the outsider. It is under my protection. See that it is given a space and a sleeping fur. It will not be harmed." Lyra's multifaceted eyes widened slightly. She looked from her imposing mate to the small, dirt-streaked boy. She detected no aggression, only a bone-deep weariness and a fear so profound it was almost a physical presence. Unlike the warriors, she saw not just a puzzle, but a child. She gave a slow, deliberate nod to Kalen, a sign of acquiescence and trust. Kalen grunted in satisfaction and then turned to leave. "I will address the tribe," he said, before disappearing through the hide flap. Left alone with the female, Leo felt a new wave of anxiety. But Lyra's presence was different. It lacked the sharp, predatory edge of the warriors. She gestured with one of her slender claws towards a small, empty alcove carved into the far wall. "You will rest there," she said, her voice softer than Kaelin's, like silk being drawn over stone. Leo nodded mutely and stumbled towards the space. It was little more than a nook, but it was shelter. Lyra placed a rough, hairy pelt on the floor for him. He collapsed onto it, every muscle in his body screaming with exhaustion. The events of the day felt like a fever dream. The chase, the confrontation, the bizarre ceremony of the shared bread. Meanwhile, in the great cavern, Kaelin faced his people. He stood on the chieftain's ledge, a natural rock platform that overlooked the main gathering space. Below him, the tribe was a sea of shifting chitin and glowing eyes, a rumbling engine of confusion and discontent. Gorok stood at the forefront, his posture a clear challenge. "You bring a creature of the soft flesh into Catharash." Gorok's voice boomed, inciting the crowd. "You accept its pathetic offering as if we were beggars. You share it as if it were a great prize. Have you gone mad, Kaelin? Have you forgotten the way of the Cathar?" Kaelin let the outrage wash over him. He was no fool. He understood the shockwaves his actions had sent through their rigidly structured society. "I have forgotten nothing, Gorok," Kaelin replied, his voice calm, but carrying immense authority. "I have forgotten that the strong take what they need. I have forgotten that the weak perish. But I have never seen a creature like this. It acted against all laws of nature. Such a deviation must be understood. Is its entire species so illogical? Or is it a singular flaw?" He leaned forward, his eyes sweeping across the assembly. "Think, if an entire species acts against the logic of survival, how can they exist? They should have been consumed by their own weakness eons ago. Yet, its vessel fell from the stars. They have mastered travel between worlds, a feat we can only dream of. How can a species of fools command such power? This is the puzzle. To destroy it would be to destroy the answer without ever knowing the question." His argument was sharp, appealing to their pragmatism over their instinct. It sowed a seed of doubt among the dissenters. They were a species that valued strength, but they were not unintelligent. The contradiction Kaelin presented was a powerful one. "It is a taint," Gorok spat. "The blight in the gloom-root fields began when its vessel scarred our skies. It is a bad omen. Its weakness will infect us." The mention of the blight sent a fresh wave of unease through the tribe. The gloom-root was their lifeblood, a tuber that grew deep in the caverns, and it was inexplicably sickening and rotting. The stores were dwindling. The hunters were finding less game on the surface. Gorok was skillfully weaving the boy's arrival into the tribe's deepest fears. "The blight is a trial of Xylos, as we have faced many times before," Kaelin countered. "We will overcome it with strength and endurance, as we always have. Blaming this child is the action of a frightened clutchling, Gorok, not a warrior." The insult hit its mark. Gorok hissed, his claws digging into the stone floor, but he could not challenge the chief directly without invoking the Kravna, a ritual duel to the death. For now, Kaelin's authority held. He dismissed the tribe, leaving them to their murmuring and suspicion. Later that night, long after the twin moons had risen, Kaelin stood alone on the highest balcony of the spire, looking out over the desolate landscape. The wind whistled through the canyons, a mournful sound. His thoughts were not of Gorok or the tribe, but of the boy. He replayed the moment in his mind, again and again. The outstretched hand, the trembling voice. "You can take my bread." An offer made from a position of absolute weakness. It was an act of trust, surrender. What was it? He thought again of his son, Cathak. The law was clear. The tribe's resources were finite. Every member had to be strong enough to contribute. A runt was a drain, a weakness that could compromise the whole. His duty as chief had been to uphold that law, to make the hard choice for the good of the many. He had done his duty. He had shown no weakness. And yet, the boy's gesture felt less like weakness and more like a different kind of strength, one Kalen had no name for, a strength that didn't come from claws or armor, but from somewhere deeper. He had felt a flicker of it when he shared the ration with his warriors. For a brief moment, the act of giving had created a connection, a bond that was different from the simple hierarchy of dominance. He looked down at his own claws, instruments of death and power. For the first time in his long life, Chief Kalen of the Cathar felt the profound and unsettling suspicion that he and his entire race might be missing a fundamental piece of what it meant to be alive. The human boy sleeping in his cavern was the key, and Kalen knew, with a certainty that chilled him to his very core, that protecting that key might cost him everything. The days that followed settled into a tense and watchful routine. Leo, now known simply as the Outsider, was a ghost in the fortress of Catharash. He stayed within the confines of Kalen's dwelling, watched over by the quiet and observant Lyra. She would leave bowls of the Cathar's staple food for him, a bland, fibrous paste made from the remaining stores of gloom root. It was gritty and tasteless, but it was sustenance, and Leo ate it without complaint. He spent most of his time huddled on his sleeping fur, trying to make sense of his new reality. He missed his parents with an ache so deep it felt like a physical part of him had been carved out. He would trace the schematics of the Odyssey in the dust, whispering the names of its systems, a desperate mantra to hold on to the world he had lost. His father, Dr. Oris Thorne, had been a patient teacher. He'd taught Leo the fundamentals of botany, how to read the health of an ecosystem, not just by what was living, but by what was dying. Everything has a language, Leo, Oris used to say, pointing to a discolored leaf on a hydroponics tray. Sickness, decay, they're just stories being told by a plant. You just have to learn how to read them. This memory surfaced as he watched the Cathar. The blight was more than just a background threat. It was a creeping dread that permeated the entire settlement. He could see it in the smaller portions Lyra served him. He could hear it in the grim, guttural arguments that echoed up from the common caverns. He saw hunting parties returning with less and less, their chitons scarred from tangling with desperate and equally hungry predators. Gorok, true to his nature, exploited this growing fear. He became the voice of the tribe's anxiety. In the evenings, his fiery speeches could be heard, blaming Kalen's weakness, blaming the soft-fleshed omen he had brought into their midst. One day, Lyra returned to the cavern, her movements heavy with worry. She placed a bowl of the grey paste before Leo, and he saw that her own portion, which she ate standing by the glowing fungus, was visibly smaller. He looked at the paste. It had a faint, sour smell he hadn't noticed before, and dark, thread-like veins ran through it. He remembered his father's lessons. This was not just scarcity, this was spoilage. The rot was in their stores. Driven by a sudden, reckless impulse, a need to do something other than cower, Leo stood up. Lyra watched him, her head tilting. He pointed to the bowl. "This food," he said, his voice raspy from disuse. "It's sick." Lyra's mandibles clicked, a sound of surprise. "It is all we have. The blight." "It's not just the blight in the fields," Leo insisted, his mind racing, piecing together fragments of his father's lectures on mycology and agriculture. "It's in your storage. It's spreading. The sickness is contagious." This concept, of a sickness spreading through inanimate food was a subtlety lost on the Cathar. To them, food either was or was not. The idea of it actively spoiling due to a microscopic agent was alien. "I need to see it," Leo said, his voice gaining a sliver of confidence. "The gloom root. The place where you grow it." Lyra was hesitant. For him to leave the dwelling was to risk the wrath of the tribe. But she had seen the dark veins in the paste, too. She had smelled the sourness, and she trusted her mate's judgment that this creature was a puzzle worth preserving. After a moment of internal debate, she gave a slow nod. She led him down the spiraling passageways, deeper into the spire, away from the prying eyes of the main tribe. The air grew warmer and more humid, thick with the smell of damp earth. They arrived at a massive cavern, lit by a network of larger bioluminescent fungi. This was the heart of Catharash, the gloom root fields. It was a disaster. Vast terraces were carved into the cavern walls, where the pale, tuberous gloom roots should have been thriving in the nutrient-rich soil. Instead, most of the plants were withered and black. A slimy web-like mold covered the soil in patches, and the air was heavy with the stench of decay. Cathar tenders, looking defeated, were pulling up the rotten tubers and casting them onto a smouldering disposal pile. Leo, ignoring Lyra's warning click, walked right up to the edge of a terrace. He knelt down, his small hands hovering over the diseased soil. His father's training kicked in, his mind shifting from that of a scared boy to that of a budding scientist. He wasn't seeing a dying crop. He was seeing a set of symptoms. "It's not a blight," he whispered, mostly to himself. "A blight is a disease of the plant itself. This is the soil. The soil is sick." He pointed to the slimy mold. "This is wrong. This shouldn't be here." He then noticed something else. Near the irrigation channels that fed water to the terraces, the decay was worse. He crawled over, peering into the channel. The water, trickling down from a deep fissure in the spire, had a faint, unnatural shimmer to it. He dipped his fingers in, then smelled them. A faint, metallic tang. "There's something in the water," he said, looking up at Lyra. "A mineral, a poison, maybe. It's not killing the plants directly. It's making the soil fertile for that mold. The mold is what's killing the roots." Lyra stared at him, her multifaceted eyes struggling to comprehend the chain of logic. They saw a sick plant. He saw a complex, multi-stage environmental problem. "We can fix this," Leo said, a spark of hope in his voice. It was the first time he had felt anything other than fear in weeks. "If we can find the source of the contamination in the water, and if we can find something to neutralize the mold in the soil—" It was at that moment that a heavy footstep echoed from the cavern entrance. Both Leo and Lyra turned to see Gorok standing there, flanked by two of his most loyal warriors. His eyes glowed with malevolent triumph. He had followed them. "So, the omen whispers it's poison," Gorok sneered, his voice dripping with venom. He pointed a claw at Leo, then at the dying fields. "It finishes the work it started. Kaelin's pet comes to the heart of our tribe to curse our very soil with its touch." The Cathar tenders stopped their work, looking from Gorok to the small human boy. Fear and suspicion, expertly stoked by Gorok, filled their eyes. He was trying to help. Lyra's voice was sharp, protective. "Help?" Gorok laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "It helps by speaking lies we cannot understand. Minerals, molds, these are the words of a deceiver. I see only this. Where the outsider goes, decay follows. It is a curse upon us all." He took a menacing step forward. "Kaelin is blind, but we are not. The tribe is starving, and the cause of our suffering kneels in our soil. It must be purged. Before Lyra could react, Gorok and his warriors lunged, not at her, but at Leo. Lyra moved with a speed that belied her slender frame. She threw herself between Leo and the charging warriors, her own claws extended, a fierce hiss ripping from her throat. "Hold Gorok! By the chief's decree, he is not to be harmed." Gorok skidded to a halt, inches from her. His raw power was greater, but challenging the chief's mate so directly was a dangerous line to cross. He sneered. "The chief is not here, Lyra, and his decrees are starving our clutchlings. Stand aside." "No," she said, her stance unwavering. The standoff was broken by Kaelin's roar, echoing from the tunnel. He had been alerted by a loyal guard. He stormed into the cavern, his presence immediately shifting the balance of power. He saw his mate protecting the human boy from his insubordinate warrior, and his eyes narrowed into furious slits. "Gorok, you dare threaten my mate and my guest in the heart of my spire?" "Your guest is poisoning our food," Gorok bellowed, gesturing to Leo and the blighted fields. "He speaks in riddles of invisible poisons and claims our soil is sick. He is a trickster, weaving a spell of ruin." Kaelin looked from Gorok's furious face to Leo, who was still kneeling by the irrigation ditch, pale but with a look of intense focus in his eyes. Then he looked at Lyra, who gave a minute shake of her head, a clear signal of her trust in the boy's words. "What did you see, child?" Kaelin's voice was a low rumble, directed at Leo. Finding his voice, Leo explained again, more clearly this time. "It's the water. Something is in it. A heavy metal, I think. My father called it a catalyst. It doesn't kill the gloom root, but it allows the grey web mold to grow, and the mold is what chokes the roots. You have to change the water source." Kaelin listened intently. The boy's explanation was bizarre, but it had a strange, internal logic. It was far more detailed than Gorok's superstitious raving. "Lies!" Gorok spat. "The water is the same water that has fed Catharash for 1,000 generations." "Environments change," Leo said quietly. "A rock slide deep in the spire, a new mineral vein exposed. It could be anything." Kaelin was faced with a choice: uphold tradition and believe Gorok, the voice of the past, or take a leap of faith on the alien logic of the boy. His decision would define his leadership. "Tyrax!" Kaelin barked to his old second-in-command, who had arrived behind him. "Take a party. Follow this water channel to its source. Look for anything new, any different-colored rock, any recent collapses. Move!" Tyrax nodded and gathered several warriors, immediately heading deeper into the spire. Kaelin then turned to Leo. "You say the soil can be fixed?" Leo nodded. "Maybe. The mold is acidic. You need something alkaline to neutralize it. In my world, we use ash from burnt wood, or certain kinds of crushed shells." The Cathar looked at each other. They didn't use fire for much besides the disposal pile. The idea of using its residue for farming was unheard of. "The disposal pile," Kaelin mused. "There is a lot of ash there." Gorok looked apoplectic. "You would listen to this squeaking pest? You would defile our sacred soil with refuse and waste based on its babbling?" "I would listen to a solution where you offer only blame, Gorok," Kaelin retorted coldly. "Your way is to let the tribe starve while you point your claws. I will try any path that might lead to survival." He turned to the tenders. "Clear a small terrace, one that is already dead. We will conduct an experiment. Bring ash." For the next 2 days, a strange new energy filled Catharash. Under Kaelin's direct orders, a small test plot was established. Leo, with Lyra as his protector and translator, directed the tenders. They were suspicious, their movements reluctant, but they obeyed their chief. They worked the cold, greasy ash from the disposal fires into the blighted soil. It felt like a funeral rite. Leo then had them transplant a few of the healthier-looking gloomroot seedlings from a less affected area into the treated soil. For water, he instructed them to use collected condensation from the cavern ceiling, which he'd tested and found pure rather than the contaminated channel water. During this time, a fragile bond formed between Leo and Lyra. She was fascinated by his knowledge, by the way he saw the world. He told her about Earth, about green forests and vast blue oceans, concepts she could barely imagine. In turn, she began to see him not as an outsider, but simply as Leo, a very small, very smart, and very lonely child. Gorok, however, was not idle. He watched the experiment with simmering hatred. Kaelin's trust in the human was a personal insult, a threat to his worldview and his ambition. If the boy succeeded, Kaelin's position would be unassailable. Gorok would be remembered as a fool. He could not allow that to happen. He had to prove the boy was a curse. And if reality would not cooperate, he would give it a push. Late on the second night, when the spire was quiet, Gorok crept down to the test terrace. The bioluminescent fungi cast long, dancing shadows. The transplanted seedlings looked stable, perhaps even a little healthier. A cold fury gripped him. From a pouch at his side, he produced a small, hardened bladder. Inside was a concentrated fluid, a potent venom milked from the deadly spire crawler spider. It was a poison that attacked root systems, causing a swift and irreversible rot that mimicked the blight perfectly. With grim satisfaction, he moved from seedling to seedling, carefully squeezing a few drops of the clear, viscous liquid onto the soil at the base of each plant. He would not just kill the experiment. He would make it look like the boy's cure had horrifically backfired, accelerating the blight into something far worse. He vanished back into the shadows, a ghost of malice, confident that by morning he would have all the proof he needed to bring down the chief and his alien pet. The next morning, Tyrax's party returned. They were weary, but had news. "Chief Kaelin," Tyrax reported, "the boy was right. Many levels up, a rock fall. A new vein of shimmering green rock is exposed and crumbling directly into the water source. We have never seen this rock before." A murmur went through the assembled Cathar. The boy's impossible theory was true. Kaelin felt a surge of triumph. He turned to lead a group to the test terrace to see the second part of the boy's miracle. "Come," he boomed. "Let us see the first fruits of new knowledge." But as they entered the farming cavern, a collective gasp of horror went up. The test plot was a scene of utter devastation. The seedlings that had looked stable the day before were now black, shriveled husks, collapsed into a pulpy rot far worse than anything the blight had produced. The soil around them was stained dark, and the sour stench of hyper-accelerated decay hung in the air. It was an undeniable catastrophic failure. Gorok stepped forward, his voice a mask of feigned sorrow that barely concealed his glee. "Behold, Chief Kaelin, behold the cure of your soft-fleshed omen. It did not heal our soil. It concentrated on the curse. It has brought a super plague upon us. I told you it was a taint. Now will you see?" All eyes turned from the dead plants to the small human boy. Leo stared, his heart sinking into a black pit of despair and confusion. It didn't make sense. The science was sound. It should have worked. The tribe, their last glimmer of hope extinguished, turned on him as one. Their clicks and hisses rose into a crescendo of anger and fear. Kaelin himself was stunned into silence, the proof of the contaminated water source now utterly overshadowed by the horrifying scene before him. Gorok saw his moment. He strode to the center of the cavern, raised his claws high, and issued the ultimate challenge. "Kaelin has been bewitched by this alien curse," he roared. His judgment is clouded, and he has led us to the brink of annihilation. I, Gorok, son of Grak, invoke the Kravna. I challenge you for leadership of the Cathar. Let strength decide who will lead our people, one who trusts in our ways, or one who consorts with ruin." The ancient words had been spoken. The challenge was made. There was no turning back. The invocation of the Kravna plunged Cathar Ash into a grim, solemn silence. The duel for the tribe's soul was to be held at the summit of the spire, on a wind-swept plateau known as the Arena of the Moons. As the tribe gathered under the eerie glow of the twin celestial bodies, Leo was confined to Kaelin's dwelling, guarded by warriors whose eyes now glowed with mistrust. Pacing frantically, Leo replayed the disastrous experiment in his mind. "It's impossible," he muttered, Lyra watching him with anxious eyes. The science was sound. Ash neutralizes acid. The water was pure. It had to be sabotaged. Suddenly, his father's lessons on Xylos's hostile fauna surfaced in his memory. "The spire crawler," he exclaimed. "Its venom is a necrotic agent to plants. It would mimic the blight, only 100 times faster." Lyra's mandibles clicked in horrified recognition. "Gorok is a master of handling the venom. He uses it on his blades. He would have some." She understood at once the depth of his treachery. To win through deceit was the ultimate Cathar dishonor. "We need proof," Leo urged. "Is there anything that reacts to the venom?" "The healers use a mollusk paste to treat venom burns," Lyra said, her mind racing. "It draws the poison out and hardens." Her decision was instant. Her mate's life and the tribe's future were being threatened by a lie. Exercising her authority as the chief's mate, she dispatched a guard to fetch the paste. Within minutes, a heavy ceramic pot of thick grey sludge was in her claws. "To the fields," Leo said, grabbing the pot. "The proof is in the soil." High above, on the Arena of the Moons, the duel had begun. It was a clash of brute force against seasoned experience. Gorok was a whirlwind of aggression, his twin hatchets carving deadly arcs through the air. Kaelin, wielding his long glaive, fought with a measured, defensive grace, his obsidian armor already bearing fresh scars from the furious assault. He was older, and Gorok's relentless attacks were beginning to wear him down. With a ferocious roar, Gorok feinted high and swept low, hooking Kaelin's leg and sending the mighty chief crashing to one knee. The tribe gasped. Gorok raised his hatchet high, the moons reflecting off its serrated edge, ready for the killing blow. "Stop!" The cry, thin and human, sliced through the tense air. Leo scrambled onto the edge of the arena, holding the pot with Lyra right behind him. "It was a lie!" Leo shouted. "Gorok poisoned the test plot." A wave of confusion and anger rippled through the crowd. "The creature raves! Silence it!" Gorok bellowed, distracted from his final blow. "He speaks the truth!" Lyra's powerful voice resonated across the stone. "Gorok used spire-crawler venom to curse the soil, and we have the proof." "Proof!" Gorok laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Show me this proof!" Leo didn't hesitate. He ran to where Gorok had left his satchel and pulled free the small, hardened bladder he'd seen the warrior carry. Uncorking it, he poured a few drops of its clear, viscous contents onto the stone floor. Then he slapped a large glob of the grey healer's paste on top of it. The reaction was immediate and undeniable. The paste erupted with a violent hiss, boiling as a column of foul, green glowing smoke billowed into the night. It flash-hardened into a blackened, coral-like mass. Every Cathar present knew that reaction. It was absolute proof of concentrated venom. The lie was exposed. In that moment of collective shock, as Gorok stared in horror at his own treachery made manifest, his focus shattered. It was the only opening Kaelin needed. Surging upward with a powerful roar, he swept Gorok's legs from under him, the duel ending not with a killing blow, but with the tip of his glaive pressed firmly against his defeated rival's throat. Victory was his. The law of the Kravna was absolute. The tribe waited for the execution, but Kalen's gaze drifted from the treacherous warrior at his feet to the small human boy who had offered him bread, knowledge, and now justice. A different path, a different kind of strength. With a deliberate movement, Kalen pulled his glaive back. "No," he said, his voice echoing in the sudden stillness. The tribe reeled in shock. Mercy was an alien concept. "The old way demands your life, Gorok," Kalen declared, his voice ringing with a new authority. "But your death teaches us nothing. Today, we learned a new lesson. That truth can be a sharper weapon than any blade, and knowledge can be a stronger shield than any armor." He leveled his glaive at his defeated foe. "You will not die. You will be stripped of your rank and live in dishonor, working to undo the damage you have wrought. Your poison will now become our provision. You will milk the spire crawlers, and we will use the venom on our hunting spears to feed the tribe you tried to starve. You will live to see us thrive on the knowledge you rejected." This judgment, harsher than death, yet utterly pragmatic, stunned the tribe into a new kind of respect. Their chief had not shown weakness. He had shown a wisdom that transcended their brutal traditions. In the weeks that followed, a quiet revolution transformed Catharash. The water source was rerouted, the fields treated, and under Leo's guidance, the gloom root began to flourish again. But the real change was deeper. Kalen established the first school, where clutchlings learned not just how to fight, but how to read, to analyze, to question. They studied botany, engineering, and the strange human concept of history. They were no longer just survivors. They were becoming thinkers. Months later, Kalen stood with Leo on the high balcony, overlooking the vast, rust-colored landscape of Xylos. Leo was no longer just a survivor, but a teacher and a cherished member of this strange, formidable family. "That day in the forest," Kalen rumbled, his voice softer than Leo had ever heard it. "I have puzzled over it 1,000 times. You were weak, cornered. By all logic, you should have fought or fled. Why did you offer me your food?" It was the question that had shattered a world and built a new one. Leo looked up at the towering alien chieftain who was now his protector. "My mother always told me that even when you have nothing, you can still offer kindness. I didn't think it would save me. I just didn't want my last action to be a selfish one." Kalen was silent for a long time, the wind whistling a mournful tune around the spire. He placed a huge, gentle claw on Leo's shoulder. The gesture, once a symbol of terrifying power, was now one of profound friendship. "Your mother was wise, Leo Thorn," the alien chief said. "That single piece of bread, that one lesson, it has fed my tribe more than 1,000 harvests. It has saved us all. On a harsh world under dying suns, a new age had dawned, not from an act of war, but from an act of grace, proving that the greatest strength in the universe was not the power to take a life, but the courage to offer a piece of bread." The story of Leo Thorn and Chief Kalen isn't just about survival. It's about the incredible power of a single idea. It shows that what we might see as weakness, compassion, generosity, a willingness to share, can become the most revolutionary strength in a universe that only understands force. Leo's small offering of bread didn't just save his life, it sowed the seeds of a new civilization and taught an entire species that the path to true advancement isn't paved with the bones of the weak, but built on a foundation of mutual understanding. It's a reminder that our humanity is our greatest technology. If this story of unlikely courage and the dawn of a new understanding moved you, please honor it by hitting that like button. Share it with someone who loves a sci-fi epic that's about more than just spaceships and lasers. And most importantly, subscribe to the channel for more stories that explore the very best of humanity's heart. Let me know in the comments, what seemingly small act of kindness has had the biggest impact on your life? Thank you for listening,